What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod. We're giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name, as always, is Pat Sheehan, and I'm here with my co-host, Dave Martin Swagger. What's going on, man?
Used to carry all the groceries in one trip, my man. How you doing?
You got too much dip on your chip, bro. Dave, I Choose You, like Ash. What a great song. Just like, Chance the
Banger.
Rapper. Give us that album, man.
July. So he says. Let's hope.
He's a man of his word. I have no doubt about that. We're going to be talking a lot of music today, actually. We got 5 albums we're going to be going over, 2 TV shows, and 1 movie that dethroned Avengers Endgame from the top of the box office, John Wick 3. So before we get too far into it, though, if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you are on iTunes, give us that 5-star rating and review. And if you want to find other ways to listen to us, go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod and find all the ways you can check out the podcast and share us with friends. And you can do that by going to our Twitter page at nostalgiapod and hitting us up there. Questions, concerns, comments. We appreciate it all. Let's start off, though, with The National. I am easy to find. Dave, The National is an interesting band. So it's one of those bands from the aughts, one of those rock bands from the aughts that are still going. You know, The Killers, Strokes took a break, kind of back together, kind of not. They at least tour every once in a while, or at least do festivals.
Dirty Projectors.
Dirty Projectors, I guess, are in there, but more like LCD Sound System, I guess, are one of the ones that are holding on. We talked about other bands on here that I don't think we necessarily need to mention because they aren't necessarily great. But The National, I think their stock continues to actually at least remain consistent. It hasn't really taken that dip, and it has actually probably gone up throughout the 2010s. This album, I'm easy to find, is their 8th album, and it's also a bit of a departure from what they normally do. They included a lot of guest vocalists, and particularly female guest vocalists, throughout this album, which they hadn't done much of in the past. Their last album, Sleep Well Beast, came out 2017. Got a lot of, I would say, acclaim for using more electronic sounds in it, which is not a typical National way of making music. But I think the word that describes them is consistent, which I think can also kind of be synonymous with boring sometimes with rock music. I'm wondering for you, a pretty critical rock ear, only liking very specific rock like Greta Van Fleet, those excellent rockers from Michigan. Did you find this National album boring?
I didn't like it nearly as much as their first record, their debut album, which, 8-album gap. It's reasonable to expect they'll sound different. So not really holding it against them, not negative. But I think the first track, you had Your Soul With You. It they mixed it so it would go in and out each ear in the beginning for a good 10 seconds. And it was actually mixed in such a cool way that I actually thought my Bluetooth was like barely connecting and bugging out until I picked up that it was actually the way it was supposed to sound. And that song kind of reminded me of some of the older stuff I had heard that was, I don't want to say the guitars were harder, but it was the more, I think, the louder side of their sound. And just even though the vocals are always pretty mellow, pretty down the middle, the beats, the rhythm of the music is still pretty upbeat and a little hard at times, and that's what I can connect to. But the back half of this album, after the first few tracks, started to lose me just because the lead singer is kind of just gonna warble a little bit. It doesn't really grab me that much. But I'm also not well versed in their music or their sound. I mean, what is your, like, you mentioned that they recently use electronic music in their last record. That's something that a lot of rock bands have almost felt forced to do to stay relevant, to make their music listenable in the modern age. But do you think they kept that going, or they almost went back to what they used to do? Because I mean, you kept saying that they're consistent. So do you think they're reluctant to change anymore, or they're just kind of sticking into what they're good at, and that's okay? Like, what's your overall take on 8 albums in?
I actually think this is one of the most the biggest changes they've had in terms of conceptualizing an album. Matt, you mentioned the lead singer Matt Berninger. Uh, he really is, for like most rock bands, the heartbeat of the band. He writes almost all the lyrics. He has this very like Leonard Cohen, Nick Cave type vibe to him, where he has this kind of like deep, sultry type voice that can really be moving, and he can make almost like the most mundane topics in songs still seem
Hmm.
pretty interesting. And there's definitely some mundane topics within here. I think there's actually a song, I can't remember which one, where he just talks about like a couple who, they still really love each other, but they just really aren't like as into each other as they used to be, and they're like, oh well, we're too invested to like move on from this, so we're just gonna kind of stay in it. It's like, oh, it's a really boring topic for a song, very like everyday life type thing, but somehow he still makes it sound good. I and what they did was, he brought his wife in, and she helped him write some of the lyrics, and they made this almost like a conversational album in a lot of ways, and that's why bringing in guest vocalists like Sharon Von Etten, whose
Hmm.
album we talked about earlier in the year, Lisa Thompson, Kate Stables, or Gail and Dorsey, who is David Bowie's longtime bassist, really adds like something to this album that not many other national albums have. And I would actually say that that makes this probably one of their most inventive albums. And it's risk taking, but in a safe way for them, because Berninger is still the heartbeat of this, and he's still the driving force. And I think songs like Light Years, which I tweeted about, I think is probably one of the most beautiful songs I've heard this year. Is when the Nationals at their best, when they're writing very simple but succinct and moving lyrics, and they're kind of relying on what they normally do, but taking chances and letting other people have a voice on this record, I think, is a sign of them trying something and trying to, I don't know, shape themselves as a band moving forward.
Shout out Aaron Dessner for curating Boston Calling. Frankly, that's
Yeah.
the most recent time I felt like the National was truly in the news for me, was their affiliation,
Hmm.
uh, you know, professionally and overratedly, I guess, with the festival. I don't know. It's interesting. Um, yeah, I feel like they're just one of these well established bands that just have a really big fan base, and they're just cool to just kind of go off to the beat of their own drum. I mean, I was just reading they recorded this at Long Pond Studio, which is like an hour north of where I'm from in the Hudson Valley. Not
Uh,
exactly the studio you think a mainstream international music act would go to record, but they don't have to worry about that kind of thing,
no.
So they can just do whatever.
Yeah, the National, I think, are. I think consistent is a good word for them, and I wouldn't say that necessarily they're boring, but I do think you can kind of find similarities, especially in their earlier albums, that you could say, yeah, well, maybe they weren't trying to go too far out, but recently they've been taking more risks. So I applaud them for that. We already added Light Years to our playlist, but you should follow that playlist, Nowstalgia Best of 2019, on Spotify. Give us that follow and stay up to date on all the music we like, including music from Rae Jepsen and her newest album, Dedicated. Rae Jepsen, man. I mean, I haven't been following her closely, but every time I hear the name, I just think of Call Me Maybe. Um,
Hmm.
and that seems to be what's really defined her. Obviously, a smash hit when it came out, and incredibly infectious and catchy song.
Best selling song of 2012 was hard to overstate just how big that song was. But I think the whole takeaway after that was that the album Kiss that she put that on didn't do that well. It was like 46,000 first week. And like that was kind of the whole talk of her career is why didn't Rae Jepsen become a pop star, capital P, like really big? And then that question only continued to grow as Emotion and Emotion Side B album and EP came out and were just like critically acclaimed pop records. Like
Mhm.
I think Emotion is like arguably one of the most lauded pure pop albums of the 2010s.
Yep.
Yet no one really listened to it. So there
Mhm.
was this whole back and forth of, is Carly Rae Jepsen actually good, or is she just something the critics are pushing that doesn't actually have an audience? Um, so I don't know how much you were really following that like convo, because again, she wasn't like super mainstream. Obviously, it's just kind of like the undercurrents, internet, Tumblr pop, um, as she became like an icon for the LGBTQ community and stuff like that. But I think I kind of like got back on board. I heard Emotion Side B before I heard Emotion, and I was like, wait, this is actually like really awesome. And I think like, first time was good, and then she did the re-release with Cut to the Feeling, which is really awesome pop song. Really tough to have any issues with that. And then I was just, I don't know, from there I was actually kind of anticipating the next thing, because I feel like the internet had like bigged her up for everyone, and this album Dedicated had a lot of hype riding on it. But I mean, what did you think of it, given that you weren't really paying attention to this lead up, this online fever pitch that was the Church of Carly Rae? What did you think?
Well, I was aware that Emotion was pretty critically acclaimed and liked. It's not also it's a record I haven't listened to many of the songs on,
Hmm.
um, and I was also aware that there was some push that she was better than what her stardom at this point actually would lead you to believe. Um, it's actually interesting to talk about. It's her career seems to have gone kind of like inverse what you would expect, like having this major pop hit at the beginning and then to kind of not get as much recognition moving forward. But to continue making music, and she writes a lot. So going into Dedicated, I was kind of expecting a incredibly quality album, but probably nothing I was gonna come away really loving, and that's exactly kind of what I got. Was I thought there were a lot of songs on here that were pretty good, and that I would listen to. She really infuses like disco into these
Yes.
songs in a way, but almost in like a very relaxed way, which I find interesting. But I think it makes the songs really pleasurable to listen to. Um, and I love that about it. But I also didn't leave here being like, that album, can't wait to go back to it.
Hmm.
It's probably an album I'll listen to maybe once or twice more, a couple songs off it, but not one I'm gonna love this year. What did you think of Dedicated though?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I can like, and both times recognize that it's a respectable, well written, emotional pop album, but also not want to revisit most of it. Like, I don't have really a problem on much of it. I think, as you said, I think the '80s influence overall is really cool, just because that's not super common in
Hmm.
pop star uh, aspiring music. But I think like, actually the first track I think was maybe the second single, Julian.
Hmm.
Um, that's just like a full like post disco song, kind of
Yep.
like a Casey Musgraves High Horse idea, like it, and that song's awesome. I think that song's really good. But some of the other singles I think are fine. They're really cool. I definitely like Emotion Side B more than this, but I think this is kind of gonna keep it going for her. And
Hmm.
I mean, I was looking at like who she's signed to and stuff. I mean, she's on some like Universal imprints. I believe Scooter Braun is involved in her career. So I think they're really going to make a big push for her to get bigger off this. But even if she doesn't, I don't think it's like a concern anymore, just because that fan base is real and is loyal. It was not made up by the critics.
Hmm.
So even if I'm not going to like run this start to back the way I feel like you can kind of effortlessly listen to Emotion Side B, uh, I still really respect it, and I think it's interesting just because pop music today, like the traditional definition of pop music, is pretty sanitized, pretty samey. Um, so much so to the point that country music is ripping it off. We've talked about this before.
Hmm.
So the fact that someone like Carly Rae can come in and kind of stick to her guns in terms of just not jeopardizing her songwriting and also taking influence from stuff that's not super in vogue, I think is pretty respectable. So good
You
stuff.
you didn't even mention her best pop song on this album, which is "Want You in My Room," produced and co-written by our guy Jack Antonoff, and that would actually I think be a really interesting pairing because it sounds like the energy she brings in that song really stood out to me from other ones from a lot of the other tracks on this album, and I think infusing her songs with a little bit more energy and I don't know, mood maybe might be really good. And I think
Mhm.
Antonoff does that really well, and it seems like she's just like a pure songwriter. Like she could crank out a bunch of songs and let Antonoff put like a spin on a whole record of them, I think could be really interesting, especially um, maybe even bringing in like Lord or something like that as like a collaboration, because obviously Antonoff and Lord,
Sure.
I think that could be something that could potentially propel Jepsen moving forward. I'm just spitballing ideas out here. You know, if a record label wants to sign me to be an ideas man, I'm totally here for it.
A&R. Let's
Yeah,
go.
absolutely. So I think we're probably gonna put one song on the playlist. Haven't done that yet, but we'll be updating that soon. Let's jump into some hip hop though, Dave. Start with Injury Reserve. These are your guys, right?
These are my guys. Hell yeah, man.
You posted a picture on your Instagram story with them.
Yes, I met Injury Reserve. I think it might have been their first or second national tour. They were opening up for the Underachievers here in Boston, and they were fucking awesome. I had already listened to their music. I listened to Live from the Dentist Office from 2015 and Floss from December 2016, the second and third mixtapes. And they had a lot of fans in the crowd, which is kind of rare for rap openers, especially someone who's the trio that's obscure and not super mainstream like Injury Reserve. So, I mean, then again, they're at a UA show, so I guess underground fans would be in attendance. But I was so impressed by that. And I think Richie really was good at commanding the room, again, a year and a half ago. And what stood out to me, besides meeting them after the show, was that some dude was like talking shit to them as like being the opener or something and telling them like to get off the stage. Some like drunk kid. Richie like jumped off the stage and fucking punched the dude in the face, got back up and kept performing. It was the fucking hardest shit I ever saw. And nothing happened because he was chilling at the merch booth at the end of the show. And it was fucking awesome. And I was asking him about it. He's like, was that cool? You good? He's like, I'm fine, man. He was just talking shit. I had to end that.
Wow.
And like, meanwhile, they have a substantial underground following at this point. They're without a question the biggest rappers to come out of Arizona, just because there's really no one else. And I think that's really cool. You know, we always talk about all the scenes, all the hubs in the country, and even England now as well, and Asian rap. We talk about all the areas where stuff comes and how the sound's different, but no one really thinks of southwestern U.S. for a place of hip hop. Like we'll talk about Houston in a second with Mike and Thee Stallion, but Arizona showing up right here with Injury Reserve. And yeah, I feel like this album was kind of a long time coming for them, and I think it continues a lot of what they've been doing. So I guess there can be good and bad with that. But what did you think? Because I mean, had you listened to really any of their stuff? Their biggest songs to this point was All This Money, Oh Shit. They had some really hard songs, but eclectic beats, which again continued on this record. But had you heard any of that before?
No, I hadn't listened to them before. I was aware that you had seen them and were into them. My take was it was a very up and down record for me. There were points when I was like, "Oh, this shit's great," and times when I was like, "I can't even get through this song. I need to skip to the next one." Um, one of the things I think that also stood out was they really seemed to, at least in the first half, rely a lot on like the kind of drums that was in Black Panther, the movie, which I like stood out very specifically to me, that they were like, I don't even know what kind of drums to describe them as, but just really stood out that it was the same style. And that actually kind of brought me around to, I think, how I heard this album was, it was like their take on Vince Staples' Big Fish theory, but like almost more extreme in ways. Whereas Vince, I think, was able to make it more cohesive and consistent, this felt like the extremes of what he was trying to do experimentally on that. And I give them a lot of credit for that, because it's their first official record. They could very easily have put something out that was going to be safe and that they know would probably have a couple of hits and people would really flock to, but they seem to stay true to what they are, which is this band that goes hard on some songs and maybe loses energy on others. Which I think the songs where they go hard is probably when I was not as into it. I think that's more of just my taste. But a song like Gravy and Biscuits, which is probably the most like pop sounding,
crossover
radio friendly song, is was probably my favorite on there. A song like Get the Fuck Up, not my thing. I wrote down as I was listening, this is a cacophony of sound, just a lot of different sounds fused together at once for me.
Right.
Were you pleased with the album though? Was this what you expected?
Yeah, well, I never loved either of their other tapes before. It's kind of the same thing as this. The energy can come and go, and
Hmm.
because the beats are relatively all over the place, just because they're so unique,
Hmm.
um, some songs just don't really work or don't lend themselves to re-listenability, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah, not a bad thing. I think they're just still trying lots of stuff, and frankly,
Yep.
that's really refreshing. Parker Corey, the white kid in the trio, he, I believe, co-produced every single beat here. That's his role, and they do a lot of cool stuff with the production. But again, it doesn't mean every song's amazing. Brockhampton kind of does the same thing. Um, One of the early singles, Jawbreaker, which has a video, I think really stands out just because that's kind of like a cool satire on like the fashion industry and done in a smart way while still sounding good. Rico Nasty featured on that. I think Jailbreak the Tesla with Amine. They had a Lucy that wasn't on any project with Amine last year. I think Tesla, it's cool. It's in their banger, but doesn't stand out next to their other ones. But I actually really like Rap Song Tutorial because
Yeah.
again, it's kind of just like a satire, like poking
Right.
fun at uh, the modern way traditional rappers make their projects and
Hmm.
attempt to find success. So I think these are guys that I'm not going to expect Gravy and Biscuits to become some big hit, even though it is obviously the closest song to pull that off. But they'll continue to be, I think, rising forces in the underground hip hop scene, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I thought they infused humor in here and satire as well, which I thought was pretty cool. And I'm definitely excited to see what they do next. I think they do need to find some cohesion in their albums in order to take it to like the next level. But there's a lot of promise here, so definitely a band to keep your eye on moving forward. Someone that I don't even think you can say keep your eye on anymore, just has arrived, is Megan the Stallion. This is what, her third album?
Uh, Third project, I believe the first one and Tina Snow are mixtapes technically. The
Gotcha.
Fever, the new ones. It's her
Fever.
first one with any label support. This is on 300 Entertainment, but yeah, I think it's still a mixtape technically. But either way, first like big official full push
Project.
release from Megan the Stallion. Yes.
So this third project, Fever, I wasn't very familiar with her. I think I went back and listened to a couple of songs just kind of get a sense of who she was. Um, and this album or this project, I guess I'll call it
It
moving
is a
forward.
debut album. I just
Debut
checked.
album.
Yes.
Gotcha. So this debut album really surprised me in terms of how quality it was, start to finish, and she seems to have really just kind of put herself on the map with this. Um, what I think I liked most about it, and I want to hear from you what you liked or didn't like, um, was that this was pretty simple record. Like the beats were like we're going from Injury Reserve to Megan the Stallion, who the difference in beats and the way that they style their music is
Stark.
totally different. Yeah, it's very stark difference. But she that works to her favor because it just allows her to shine. And the way that she flows over any beat and she just has such a clear voice throughout, I thought was probably the most impressive thing. And I found a lot of these songs pretty funny too. Just the way that
Mm.
she like talks about things or um some of the hooks on these or the verses on these I thought were just hilarious. So Megan the Stallion, were you as high in this album as I was?
Oh yeah, definitely. This blew me away, and I was already a pretty big fan of Tina Snow. I mean, Big Old Freak was like her viral hit, dance challenge, and I think Solange twerked to it, and Rihanna followed her on IG afterwards from it. Like that was really what got like the ball rolling for her in earnest. But that, Too Cocky off that, and even songs from her first tape, like I downloaded those too. Like she just had a lot of like really competent uh, raps right away, which
Mhm.
always can put you on the map. And reductively, because she's a woman, she gets viewed differently, unfortunately. But and like to the point where they like a fake Cardi B beef was created. That's how you know Megan the Stallion was a big deal when that happened, right?
Mhm.
But I think again, not to compare her to women, but she reminds me a lot of City Girls in the sense that very cocky, very feminist, but not afraid of open sexuality and things like that.
Mhm.
Trap beats, confident, rapid fire flows, very similar sound, But I actually like Megan Thee Stallion more just because I think this Fever record in particular, as you said, just really just hits hard basically the whole time.
Hmm.
And it didn't really grow stale for me. It's only 30 minutes long, a lot of tracks on there, but I think she kind of really just honed in on what she can, what she does best. I mean, right from the first song, Reeler. I mean, my
Hmm.
God, it's just
Yep.
fucking melt your speakers type shit. And I mean, we were texting about it. I mean, Pimpin', Cash Shit, Simons. There's so many hits on this,
Yep.
and it's just really exciting because I mean, you once you look into her career more and you realize she's just wrapped up her college degree. She's been in college this whole time, and like her mom is her manager, and her mom used to like rap back in the day,
Hmm.
and it sounds like she has a really good head on her shoulders, and also has a lot of industry support. So it's just really exciting because I think she's no doubt going to be a big star like right away.
Is she still able to be picked for the XXL double XL list, freshman list?
Definitely, yeah. I think I briefly mentioned her when we did our video like a month ago.
Hmm.
And again, this Fever record hadn't come out when they made that decision for this year. But given that Big Old Freak went pretty viral, and she really started, and she's doing a lot of freestyles at that time too, always keeping her name out there, I would not be shocked at all if she got picked. And frankly, it would be coming at a great time for her and for XXL for that matter, given her
Hmm.
rapidly rising fame. So yeah, I mean, I would root for that just because she clearly, has it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a feature on here on Cash It by DaBaby. Someone
Oh
else who
yeah.
could be an XSL freshman. I
Hmm.
thought he was fantastic. And
Yeah.
that song you mentioned, Pippin, Weak Ass Bitch, WAB,
Yep.
all those songs really stood out, as well as you said, Reeler. Just there's hit after hit on here. And um, we talk all the time about like artists be watching artists that are on the rise. She's positioned herself to be a mega star, I think. If she can get some good guest features between now and whenever her next album comes out, and that's a hit, I think we'll see her rise pretty quickly. Um, Really exciting to have someone like this coming into the rap scene, and
Hmm.
just female rappers right now in general are having a moment, a real
Yes.
rise right now in that area. But we'll probably do an end of the year breakout about that because I think there's, especially if Tierra Wax album is as good as we're hoping it will be, that's
Sure.
supposedly coming out soon. I think we'll have a lot to talk about there. Um, Want to move on to Tyler?
Oh yeah. Give me 1 second.
Igor.
Wolfgang.
Igor. Odd Futures. Tyler the Creator. Man, so it's interesting. We talked about Carly Rae Jepsen, and I said, I think about Call Me Maybe, and I think about Tyler the Creator when he first came up, probably a little bit before Carly Rae Jepsen, right? Like a year or two out of future,
Uh,
maybe even a little bit
no,
more than
even
that.
if, I mean,
But
Tyler
in
really
the
popped
eight
off in
thousands,
like '09.
yeah, that
Like the whole
makes sense.
decade really was in the first half of it, the Odd Future wave really was at full throttle, I'd say by like 2011. So
Yeah,
yeah, right a little before Carly, but yeah, similar.
and I was definitely when it first came out. I mean, it was a huge movement, like you said, and then I kind of lost interest in following him. I think I found his music a little bit inaccessible, only because it sounded very just like dark, angry. It was salacious. I think in a lot of senses,
Sure. Shock.
a bit off putting. Yeah, a bit off putting at points. And then Flower Boy came out two
Yep.
years ago, Grammy nominated. Uh, and this was a different Tyler, the Creator, than we had heard before. A little bit more upbeat, kind of seeing life through a different lens, or at least talking about life through a different lens. Flower Boy's a lot more jazz infused. He's finding a new sound, and then Igor comes out, and this is an album that's written, produced, arranged. Anything that the album had to have done, he did. So this is
Yep.
totally his work. I was a little bit concerned. I was like, is this gonna actually be what he thinks it's gonna be, or is this gonna be maybe a flop?
Mm.
Igor, what was it, a hit for you or was it a flop?
Oh, it was definitely a hit. I didn't have that same concern, but that's kind of interesting to think about because you can think of 2 records ago in 2015, Cherry Bomb, which
Hmm.
was a big swing, his first real swing at attempting to escape just being a pure rapper.
Hmm.
And it was largely inaccessible. Most of the songs weren't very good. Smucker's exception. But having if Cherry Bomb had happened again with Igor, man, I hadn't thought of it that way, but that would have been interesting if he just kind of got lost in his own devices again. But no, I think Igor is fantastic, and frankly, I think there's so much going on with this album that it requires multiple listens, and I
Yeah.
still haven't given it all the time it needs.
Hmm.
But upon the first listen and ran back a lot of our tracks since then, I like a lot. I like a lot of it. I think it's really impressive, and as you said, he's come a incredibly long way from kill people, burn shit, fuck school. You know,
Yep.
it's it's been quite the ride. And I was actually looking back, and he's released an album every other year the past 10 years. Like this is his sixth album. 09, 11, thirteen,
He's
15,
working.
17, 19. Tyler's that guy. He's real.
Hmm.
And this is it's funny. I think he's 28 now, and to make this kind of progression from 18 to 28, again, it's no one saw it coming. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome, especially because when he first came up, I think people weren't even sure really what to make about Future. Like, was this a real thing? Is this just like a niche movement that's catching some craze? And he's really established himself now as I guess you can't say like an elder statesman, but like you said, he's been making albums every other year. Like this is his sixth album. That's crazy. Um, to go back to Igor specifically, though, I think what I found most intriguing about this was it's incredibly unconventional, and we've been talking a lot more recently about genreless albums. This is definitely a hip hop album, but it infuses so many other sounds throughout. It's chopped in such a specific way. There's a lot of distortion in terms of the vocals on here, whether it's pitched up or pitched down. Songs end abruptly, but it still feels very cohesive, and I think that's what's really impressive. Is it feels like you're really going through um, a ride of different emotions and thoughts. It seems to be based around losing a relationship of this person that Tyler was in love with, and then this guy left him for a woman, and Tyler kind of grappling with that throughout the album in a lot of ways. But he really, I think, produced this in a way that is very interesting and unique, but that feels still like a whole. This album, I think, feels like a whole, even though you can take individual songs off here and enjoy them. And I think that's really impressive for someone who, like you said, had not such a great run their first time around producing.
Yeah. And I mean, he's long waxed poetic about his love of Pharrell, and
Hmm.
really been a fan of the whole rap machine, to be honest, which
Yep.
was always funny because he was such a iconoclast, or presented himself that way when Not Future was at its peak. And yeah, we reviewed Earl, some rap songs last year. Earl certainly has long rejected his come up in terms of the music he makes now. Same for Sid and the internet. Um, but Tyler, I guess the elder statesman thing's been thrown around. It's kind of true, just because I mean he's like friends with like close friends and like just part of the rap game, even if he doesn't make like the same kind of music as ASAP Rocky and Q and Wiz and all those people. But he's just like one of those dudes. He's kind of at the top. I mean, remember Kendrick name dropped him in Control. That was 6 years ago,
Hmm.
and he's only gotten better since then.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I think this one in particular, I actually it's early, but I think I like a lot of these songs more, or want to revisit these songs more than Flower Boy. Like Flower Boy was really impressive. Just, I mean, obviously, like he was talking about his sexuality really for the first time in earnest on that. But
Hmm.
songs like Garden Shed and Boredom and really good songs, but songs I didn't run back that often just because of the mellowness of them.
Hmm.
But I mean, Who Dat Boy and I Ain't Got Time, See You Again, like big hits from him off that album. But in this one, I think songs like Earthquake, excuse me, with Playboy Cardi. Shout out Cardi being on this, by the way.
Yep.
Uh, Run Out of Time, A Boy's a
Yeah.
Gun. I think, man,
That
they're
beat switch up on Running Out of Time is like crazy how good that is.
man, these are songs too. They're so cool to listen to on their own. And then as you listen
Mhm.
to them in sequence, and you hear how the beats change within the song, and then in transition, it's just again, there's a lot here. I still have to parse a lot of it out, but
Mhm.
I think it's really great.
Yeah, and to kind of go back to that genre-less sense, like one of the songs that stood out most to me was the closer, "Are We Still Friends?" And that song is just like straight soul, like soulful as fuck. But then probably the song that stood out to me next is What's Good, which is just it's a banger. It's a song you want to move around to, dance to. Whatever he tried to do with each song on this album, he does well. And I think that's the most impressive thing is that this really feels like this unlocks something for Tyler in terms of what his career and what his potential as an artist is. And that's just really exciting. If you haven't checked out Igor yet, or maybe if you haven't really been in on Tyler, which if you weren't in after Flower Boy, what are you doing? But get on and listen to this because I think this is an album that you can't miss for 2019 for sure.
One last question: how did you feel? Before and certainly after him, Mike Posnering us and telling us to turn your fucking phone off, listen straight through, don't be distracted, or else sentiment, which I also broke right away because I was texting you about the album.
Yeah. How did I feel about it? I find that a bit pretentious when artists do that, and it's no different for Tyler. I do think though, almost with anything, or if you like a movie a lot, like this is the same issue we had with Roma last year. If you're gonna go into something like that, something that there's potential, you're gonna be not paying attention, that you're going to be distracted in some sense, and it's something you really care about, you should take the time to listen to it with the least amount of distractions as you can. I think texting your friends and talking about the album can only enhance it though. So I don't know if I necessarily count that, but I do think when artists kind of put it up there, it's like, dog, like, this ain't it.
It's
like,
audio. It's a little different. Sorry.
Exactly. Which actually something I would recommend watching, giving your full attention to, is the Nationals movie or short film that they did, which we forgot to mention, is starring Alicia Vikander, our queen, which I think is actually accompanies the album very well and is very moving. So definitely I recommend checking that out, and definitely check Igor out for sure. Why don't we move on though to something that nobody missed? Game of Thrones, the finale, the series finale.
Highest rated HBO episode ever. I think it was 19 million initially when the first the first initial viewing and the immediate streaming. And then, I mean, the past episodes this season were ballooning up to, I think, in the 40 millions within the week. So, I mean, monoculture, as we've said ad nauseum, but it is true. But it's also funny because a few days ago, Big Bang Theory signed off, and that also did like 18 million on CBS.
I did not watch that one. I totally missed that. And we're not going to be
twice as many homes, by the way. Broadcast channel, not the same.
Definitely not the same. So Game of Thrones is over. Why don't we talk about the episode first, and we'll give our thoughts about the show as a whole at the end. We've talked ad nauseum about the issues with this season, and mostly it's the pacing. I think the last two seasons, if they had been stretched out a bit more to 3, maybe even doubled, and they were able to be 4 seasons, that would have definitely helped the show and the storytelling of the show, and it would have made things felt a lot more earned. It would have made decisions that the characters made feel more true to who they were and the circumstances that are driving these decisions. But overall, our take has been that the show is still good. And it's still pretty satisfying. We're getting a lot of the things we want, even if it's not necessarily always in the way we want. And I think this episode kind of fits that. I left and I said, that was a fine finale to everything. I felt like what they've done well all season, they did well here. The interpersonal, emotional moments were great. The Jon Tyrion conversation was great. Jon killing Dany was great. The Starks goodbye and them all going in their different directions, I thought was really good. Even the throne room conversation between Tyrion and Bronn and Davos and Brienne,
I love that one.
was fantastic. All of that stuff was really good. And Tyrion seeing Jaime and Cersei, all that stuff was great. Where I think the show fumbles a bit is probably the meet and greet in the Dragon Pit. I think there was some stumbling there.
Interesting.
I think there's some questions in terms of like, do all the decisions that they made for the show make sense in terms of like what's next? But I think overall it was a fine finale, and I'm satisfied with the way that they wrapped it up. How did you feel about the end of Game of Thrones, the last episode.
Yeah, I did find the finale quite satisfying, and as you were saying, I haven't really had an issue with basically any story beat that has happened. Uh, just the rush pacing can make the effectiveness wane.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that everything was ineffective from a plot perspective because of this. That's certainly not true. But some things you think just would have landed better with more time, as you were saying. But this and I see some of the discourse around the finale leaving open questions, and I was like, I thought we accepted like weeks ago that they're not going to answer every question, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just not what's we're interested in. Like we're not going to find out if Alaria Sand and Septa Nunella are still in the fucking dungeons that Cersei had them in. Like
Yeah.
that's not coming back up, and nor is that a substantial gripe to have, in my opinion. Like I just don't know why people are focusing on these weird things, you know. And like, yes, at the Dragon Pit, was that guy Howland Reed one of the unknown lords there? I think he was. Would have been cool to hear from Howland Reed a long time ago. At this point, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And frankly, I really liked the Dragon Pit scene just because I was just like, who are these people? Is that a Manderly on the right? New Prince of Dorne they mentioned, Oscar Isaac looking motherfucker.
Yeah.
Fuck Quentin, by the way. If you read the books, he sucks. I really like that just because great opportunity to dunk on Edamir one last time.
Yeah.
Tobias Menzies coming back. That was fantastic. Also,
Uncle,
Robin
sit
Aaron
down.
with the
Yes.
big glow up, like fucking
Yo.
Neville Longbottom out of Harry Potter, man. Just
Solids are treating him well, son.
I clicked on his Twitter and I did something else and I refreshed it and it like jumped up the followers. Like you go into his Instagram comments right now. I think he's an Italian actor. People are shook. Let's put it that way. And it's just really funny. There's a lot of Robin pieces this morning. So that was cool. But I think the small council scene, as you mentioned, man, I just had a smile on my face that whole time. That was just so cool to see Tyrion, Bronn, Davos, Sam, Bran a little bit, Pod in the King's Guard with Brienne. Like, man, I thought that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat, I found the whole finale really satisfying. And Jon having a tragic end, despite quote winning, is kind of what we predicted all along.
Mm-hmm.
We thought he would die as a result, but same difference, TBH.
True.
And like the whole not having a happy ending. Yeah, Jon did not have a happy ending.
I actually feel
kind
like
of going
did,
full
though.
circle for him. And maybe he wanted to go up to the north, so I guess it's not a total loss for him. He's with Ghosts and Torment after all, and he always felt more at home and at peace up there. But the sacrifices he made largely are unrecognized. And like I saw people bringing up, does this mean that his lineage as Aegon Targaryen, as the rightful heir, didn't matter? It's like, no, it still mattered. It certainly drove the whole half of this season. Just because they didn't make him king, I think doesn't mean it was all for naught. You know what I mean? So
I think that's a substantial or I think that has some legitimacy though, especially just because the show built that up over 6 seasons. Like there's going to be this big twist, like Jon's parentage. It's this huge thing that one of the best episodes is the Winds of it's not the Winds of Winter, is it?
The Winds of Winter, season 6 finale. Yeah.
Winds of Winter, where they had the scine where you find out Lyanna Stark tells Ned, and then it cuts to Jon's face. And I think the fact that the payoff on that is just that it basically made him feel uncomfortable being with Dany, who I think was probably going to snap regardless. And that's not even brought up in that Dragon Pit scene. Just feels like, okay, like this didn't hit the way that you would have expected with a reveal and a build up to that kind of secret being revealed like that. I felt like that was a bit fumbled.
Yeah, well, again, I think that really just is described the pacing. With more time to explore this development, we would have gotten more from it beyond its basic driving of the plot and driving of decisions, specifically Dany's. And yeah, that sucks. Like I wanted more time with basically everything, right? Most people did.
Sure.
And yeah, I guess that is something that suffered, but I reject the notion that it like didn't matter at all, because it certainly did. I mean, what did you think about Bran becoming king? I mean, Bran the Broken, not the best title. Let's put it that way. I
Yeah.
mean, I was trying to think of if you want to do alliteration, like Bran the Flyer, Bran the. Is there a
Have
B
you
word for that?
have you ever had, or have you ever seen someone get such a high honor and then get dunked on as much as Bran did in that like 2 minute sequence? Tyrion was like, who has a better story than Bran the Broken? And then Sansa's like, yo, his dick doesn't even work. Like, he's not going to
So
be able to have
funny.
heirs. I was like, yo, good thing this guy doesn't have emotions. And honestly, I thought Bran was going to be like, nah, this isn't me, son. He's like, this is exactly why I'm here. I was like, what? So you're telling me this was Bran's plan all along? Like,
Well, I
I don't
think
know.
my read on that was just that for him foreseeing what needs to happen, he foresaw that that's what him as a very neutral, objective figure now as the Three-Eyed Raven needed to rule as a result. That was my read on that. I mean, yes, I know like you could point to I'm not Bran anymore. I'm not really a man. Whatever, all those quotes he had about just being the Three-Eyed Raven. I get that, but I mean, I don't know. Three-Eyed Raven was kind of a realm protecting, powerful figure throughout time, and doing that from the throne. I don't know. NBD, in my opinion, from
So
that
is it
perspective.
right? And I think one of the questions I'm left with is how sustainable is that, or is that the plan? Like Bran picks someone to be the Three-Eyed Raven, and then that person's the king. Is that going to be the heir? Like there's unanswered questions which we're never going to get the answers
Right.
to. But
Well, and that was funny at the Dragon Pit. They're like, what if we have the common folk help with the voting? And all
yeah,
these coastal elites are all like, fuck that.
yeah,
So it's like more oligarchical than truly democratic, but still
right.
ultimately, was this Danny's original vision? The wheel has been broken. Yes, the throne was literally melted, but more importantly, like royal bloodlines are gone.
Hmm.
And there's been so much turnover with the houses of note that it does feel like a true regime change to me. And of course, the North is now free, um, and like free in quotes, not they were oppressed before, but
But the Iron
um,
Islands aren't, even though they were told they'd be free. So Yara's just like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Cool. Let the North be free. I'm cool being ruled by this weird kid. Like these are just the things I had issues with. Like also Grey Worm just seemed to do a 180 in that whole meeting. Like came in like, nah, I'm not hearing any of this, and then was just like, oh, okay, like I'm fine with this prisoner all of a sudden talking and running the meeting. Like just a lot of like inconsistencies with
right.
the
Well, I
way that
saw
I
some
didn't
people
make
saying like, why
sense.
would these lords listen to Tyrion?
But he's the
And
smartest person in the realm.
yeah, and like he's responsible for the city beat. I was like, no, he's not. He said like it's just Danny's fault that she burned the city. Like Tyrion
Right.
doesn't get blamed for this, and Tyrion tried to be good. Like
Hmm.
I don't I really didn't understand that criticism. Like, why would they listen to what Tyrion has to say? It's like, yes, has Tyrion's logical compass gone up and down as the plot needed it to? Yes, no kidding. But having it came back to what he did best. And
Hmm.
Dinklage, of course, had a great episode as a result.
Great episode for
Didn't
Dinklage.
well, that tracked for me. I really didn't understand why that didn't work for people. Um,
I thought Amelia Clark was great in this episode too.
yes,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and Kit Harington as well. But I thought especially Amelia Clark this season had a lot to do and nailed it. Kit Harington pretty much just said for most of the season, "You are my queen," like that in his brooding sense.
Right.
But
What did you think? Now, so for John, I saw this going around. John ultimately was convinced to kill Danny
mhm.
and never gave up his claim. It was taken from him. Do you feel like that hurt John's agency overall? I didn't really mind it. Like it made all of it made sense within the story for me.
Mhm.
Granted, John was one of the main protagonists, so I guess it would have been nice to give him more of like a just more time to pontificate. I guess, of course, more time. We would have gotten into John's head more. Of course, that would have been great. But I didn't really mind how it went down for him. I mean,
Well,
he got his old locks back
yeah,
while he was in jail, and I
I
really liked the Danny scene when he killed her. So I didn't have an issue with that either.
I do feel if you listen to binge mode, one of the themes they talk about a lot is the person that doesn't want to rule oftentimes is the best ruler. And
Like Bran.
Yeah, the reluctant ruler, sure. Although Brand didn't seem all that reluctant. He was like, "Yeah, son, give me that crown. I'm with it." Um, John, though, I think, and this is one of the themes that came out of the story overall for me, is a lot of times people are who they tell you that they are, and I think John told people almost in every single season, "I'm just a soldier. Like I take orders. Like sure, I'll like lead men if I have to, but he's not really born to be the person who's on the throne making those sort of decisions. Sansa is built for that. Bran, I guess now somehow is built for that. Tyrion's definitely built for that. But kind of like Grey Worm, I think John's just a soldier, man. And I think that's how at least I reckon with him not having as much agency as maybe people would want him to have in these stories. That's just kind of who he is. And I think nature, what it like human nature in this is a major theme of the story. And someone like Arya, who in the first season tells you, "Oh, I'm not that type of girl. I'm not going to
Mhm.
be that way."
Not a lady.
And now she's goddamn Henry Hudson. She's going out and exploring the new world, man. Ferdinand Magellan and that shit. So it's cool to see like that payoff of like people being who they've always been and seeing that develop through time. I guess with the exception of Bran, who became something totally not him, but that's a whole nother storyline. So I wanted to ask you though, because I think season 8 has gotten a lot of critique, and people were saying that this was an awful way to end the show. Did you feel like season 8 was a good Throne season, a bad Throne season, a great Throne season? Like, where would you put it up there with the other? Like, I think season 4 or 5 is like regarded as probably
Five.
the best one. 5,
Oh, best. Yeah, best would be 3 or 4, depending
3 or
on,
4, yeah.
and then 6, depending on who you ask. Um, I still thought it was a good season,
Hmm.
but again, there's a lot of qualifiers because it's truncated,
Yep.
and but there are so many great moments. Obviously, all the technical stuff we haven't really talked about.
Yeah.
Both this episode with like the shot of Drogon's wings and Drogon with the snow, and yes, that's all CGI. Yeah, no kidding, but it's still required shooting and
Hmm.
vision to make. Um, that shit was great, and everything with the
Yeah.
bells was technically a masterpiece, whether you cared about Danny's turn or not. And of course,
Yep.
the long night, same thing. Even if you had trouble following along visually. And then let's not forget this season we had a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the where Brienne gets knighted, the episode before the Battle of Winterfell,
Yep.
which is like a top tier Thrones episode, the peak of characters meeting in a place
Hmm.
and shooting the shit, and it's like the best Thrones stuff we've ever gotten is exactly what that episode was,
Yep.
and yeah, again like this and season 7 are just kind of a piece because of the seemingly unforced error that was choosing to shoot less than before. But I still don't. I still was satisfied almost every single week by almost everything, and again, never had a problem with the story. So yes, I still think it's a good Throne season. But seasons 3 and 4, which are the adaptations of Storm of Swords, I think the plot and the story is such a grand scale at that time, and the seasons themselves are just so awesome. I remember in that we get the death of Robb, the death of
Hmm.
Joffrey, the death of Oberyn.
Yep.
There's so much awesome stuff that happens from a story perspective, and it's executed so well in the show that,
Yeah.
I mean, the show peaked at that time. Of course it did. But in terms of having to end, this season had to end the ship, land the plane,
Yeah.
and
It landed.
it landed it. So it's still a good season.
Yeah. I agree. It's still Game of Thrones, I think, bucked what it meant to be a television show in so many ways, and that's a tribute to George R. R. Martin's story. I've seen a lot of people saying he's a big winner of Thrones season 8. All the criticism it's
Nope.
received. I actually would
Sorry.
say the opposite. Um, get that story done. I think one of the things I feel most almost like cheated by is I loved seeing the way that this story was adapted on the screen and the fact that it wasn't able to be exactly what it was intended to be because he hasn't written these stories. It's just very frustrating. And I want to see him get these stories done because I'm probably going to have to read the books and catch up at this point because I want to know how things are supposed to end.
Well, you have plenty of time.
Yeah, and maybe all the time in the world because we don't actually know if we'll get these done.
Yeah, the crux of George is a big winner because this season was polarizing. Doesn't really track with me because, well, oh wait, the point is people are really excited for him to keep writing the books so we can read them, like
We
as if
already
that
were.
was somehow different 6 weeks
Right.
ago.
Mhm.
No, like, George is taking L after L because he doesn't finish the story that he started writing in 1991.
Yep.
It's only L's here, and frankly, they started shooting the spin-off a few weeks ago, FYI, and that probably comes out the end of next year, or maybe early 2021.
Yeah.
Wait till the next book isn't out when we see a trailer for the spinoff. Like, I'm sorry, but this everything is on George in terms of his story being taken from him. And
Mhm.
by the way, he told them what happened, so we expect Danny to break bad in the
Yes.
books. It's been
Exactly.
foreshadowed in the books as well, so it's not like Benioff and Weiss went off tilt and made
Yep.
shit up. Like
Um,
they got the broad strokes anyway.
we're gonna get a Maisie Williams Arya
Nah,
exploring. No, you don't think so? I think we'll
no
get a
way.
spinoff.
No. Frankly, I think she wouldn't be interested in it as an actor. But also, I think they've basically said that all of these spin-offs that are in various stages of development,
Our
including the
prequels.
Long White one, are prequels. I believe the Long White one is codename Blood Moon.
Ooh, I
And
like that.
we're going back, hundreds and up to thousands of years in the past. And like, I mean, this Long Night one, yes, it's a prequel, but this is like pre-Targaryens, pre-Andal invasion. This is like First Men shit, Children of the Forest, Leon the Clever, Bran the Builder, Last Hero. This is like way back there, and frankly, would
And
probably feel very different. And that's really cool. And obviously, this world is never going away. This gap we get between now and that spinoff is, frankly, going to be the largest gap we ever get again for at least
Thrones content.
15 years, probably. So, um,
Yeah, you
embrace
know,
it.
it's interesting, and I think what makes me excited for that Long Night spinoff is the fantasy elements, and that's actually probably one of my biggest disappointments of the season. It's just how basically after episode 3, they decided we're not really going to deal with the fantasy elements anymore. We never got Arya with another faceless man type situation where she's using someone else's face. We didn't really learn much more about Bran and his magical abilities and what he can do. And I do feel like that's something that the books will be able to expand on in a way that the show wasn't able to. And I think just chose not to try to anymore, which I think is an understandable decision, but still a disappointing one for me. Um, just want to get that in there. Last question, or maybe two more. Is this the last monoculture TV show?
It has to be. It has to be.
Yeah.
Just because, as we've said ad nauseum before, I'll say it again. So much stuff is competing for your time these days, and a lot of the shows that do come out are released all at once, a la Stranger Things and stuff on Amazon and most Hulu shows, and just doesn't lend itself to a 6 week bonanza that we just went through the way Thrones did.
Mhm.
And I mean, Barry, we'll talk about Barry in a second. Barry got like 2 million uh, original viewers last night, which was more than double season one's finale. Great gains. But like Barry is a show that everyone you talk to loves it. Every critic shouts to the moon about it. Is but a piece of dust in the cultural landscape because there's just so much shit going on. And that would still be the case if it wasn't competing with Thrones or going on right after Thrones, right? And like, I mean, what's supposed to fill this void and attempt to be this or even be Breaking Bad, something that was really big but not quite this big,
Mhm.
like the Lord of the Rings show. Um, I feel like it has to be very, very good to get enough people interested. Just because I think, largely speaking, the Hobbit movies brought people down out of the Middle Earth High. Even if I still like most of the Hobbit movies, but I mean, the Marvel Disney Plus shows, The Mandalorian. I just don't think these shows are going to get the ratings unless Disney Plus
Yeah.
gets 50 million subs in like 3 months. I just don't think we have the infrastructure nor the stuff in the immediate future that has even a chance to attempt to grab this
What
much of the pie. It's just not it's not realistic.
what about the Game of Thrones spin-offs? Do you think they have a chance to potentially grab the culture like this again?
I think the spin-offs are going to do very well. Um, and because HBO will push them and they have the Thrones affiliation and
Mhm.
they'll be heavily, heavily marketed. But it won't be as big as this show. I don't think
Yeah.
that's likely at all. And I would have said that even if this season was a 10 out of 10, everyone loved it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, again, I just don't. It's tough. Like spin-offs, prequels, continuing of IP, it very rarely continues the highs that it originally captured.
Yeah.
And you can look at anything in movies and TV; it's usually the case. So, um, I guess in a sense that's sad, just because it was so fun and so awesome to watch this show live. And
Mhm.
as I said before, started watching this show live during season 2, so I've been really following the week to week of it for a very long time. And there really wasn't anything like it, especially once Breaking Bad ended. So it is gonna kind of suck, and this is why I always push for make put out your shows week to week because the conversation will be larger. Even if it
Yep.
won't be this large, it'll still be much larger. It's just better.
All right, serious last question now for Thrones. Where's this rank in your all-time TV shows? Your personal list.
Top 3.
I think it's probably top
Haven't haven't
5 for me.
haven't thought about it. Breaking Bad, Leftovers, this
Yeah, I
some
put
order.
Breaking Bad, Leftovers, The Wire, definitely above it. Trying to think of if there's a show I'd put fourth. Um, but yeah, it's up there. And just it's a spectacle in every sense. There's not going to be another show I think that reaches this level of production, this level of just being talked about,
Mm-hmm.
popularity. So,
Wait, you're saying Westworld season 3 doesn't have that potential?
actually, that trailer when I saw,
Aaron Paul.
yeah, Aaron Paul, I was like, huh, I'm intrigued. I'm willing to give it a couple episodes to see, and I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Maybe
We'll at
it'll
least
make
hate watch
sense
it.
after 20 hours.
Why don't we move on to Barry? So you mentioned Barry, critically acclaimed, very popular show right now. Bill Hader, at the helm. uh, Season 2, we haven't really talked much about it. Um, Season 2, I think people were kind of wondering how is this show gonna continue its momentum from season 1, which has been just lauded and was on top of everybody's favorite shows of last year. And they definitely, I think, actually upped their game this season. And I think that speaks to not only Hater. I felt like he kind of uh, went up another level in terms of performance, but I think also just the show in general is very creative and it speaks on themes that not a lot of other shows are necessarily talking about. Uh, that it brings out the best of whoever it is, and I thought the season 2 finale was a great culmination of that. And I just want to see what happens in season 3 now with the way it ends. They do cliffhangers really well in this show,
Mm.
almost to like a fault where I feel like really frustrated. I'm like, I just want to watch more now, which is great, but also like give me more Barry. What were your thoughts on season 2?
Yeah, as you said, and I was part of this, a lot of concern trolling about the need to keep the show going and the desire to keep the show going. You mentioned this, we talked about the premiere, and again, it's kind of foolish to tell people that the best thing they ever made should stop right away. Like, obviously, it's not the most realistic thing in the world,
Yeah.
especially when 500 scripted shows are made every year. But what most impressed me about Barry in season 2 wasn't so much the cliffhanger at the end, although I did that find that very effective. And I was really just impressed with the continued character growth, basically across everywhere. And Barry, as we learn about his uh, incident and resulting PTSD from
Mhm.
Afghanistan,
Yep.
um, just adding more and more layers to everyone in the story. And along the way, Fuchs, who was really kind of an aloof, uh, jolly character, you know,
Hmm.
going full antagonist by the end of this and doing some truly sinister things in the back half of the season
Yeah.
felt totally earned and right. And you understood why Fuchs was going down that road, but it was still tough to swallow. And I think that's ultimately the overall takeaway of with Barry is that it's a show that has a lot of really dark humor, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of drama here and a lot of funny shit. But a lot of times it's tough. And Sally has, I think, a great arc. I know some people found Sally to be a bit of a uh, irritating presence at times, just in terms of coming across as more of a self-centered person in the beginning. You know, your typical wannabe LA resident trying to find stardom, all that. It was not unique in the beginning,
Hmm.
but they had a lot more layers of Sally in terms of her past trauma and the all the things she weighs in her decisions. And I really liked her arc. And Sarah Goldberg again continues to impress in that role. Um, and then NoHo Hank, a character that we were very
Yes.
happy stuck around at the end of season one. Anthony Kerrigan just really sells it, and even Hank has a bit of a journey
Yeah.
as the Chechens and Bolivians and Burmese all reject him over time, and then most of them die at the
Yep.
end anyway. But yeah, and as we said before, Hiro Murai shoots most of this, and it looks amazing. The saturation,
Yep.
color saturation, is really great all the time. Uh,
Yep.
so it's just an awesome visual watch. But having the beats, having Barry and his relationship with Gene, and it's just
Hmm.
really great to watch. And even if sometimes it's awfully dark, and I think that that's quite the testament that you can make people disinvested in something that's often not very happy.
Yeah. It. I mean, if you think about it, it's centered around Barry's PTSD, how Fuchs has taken advantage of his PTSD, how Sally has her own PTSD, but
From
kind of
domestic violence.
from domestic violence, but uses that in a way to like propel herself and her career forward.
Hmm.
Gene dealing with his trauma now from the loss of the love of his life,
Yeah,
detective. I forget
just
what her
grief.
name is. Yes, just grief in general.
Janice.
And then, yeah, Janice. And then you kind of see them putting in commentary on LA lifestyle, on people chasing success, people using these things in their life to get success. And then also commentary in the second to last episode about how easy it is for, men like Barry to get auditions, and Sally has
Yes.
to claw and scrape her way around it. And I think that there's some really smart commentary throughout. Um, it works on so many different levels that it's just really fantastic. NoHo Hank, I'm always gonna remember him when the bus started to burn, the barbecue bus, and him just kind of like making all these
Guys.
confessions, uh, similar to oh, man, I'm trying to think of the movie right now. Almost Famous. When they're on
Right.
the plane and it almost goes down. Um, just the show has so many moments, and I think the episode most people talked about this season was, I think it was episode 4, entitled Lily, about
Ronnie/Lily. Yeah.
Ronnie/Lily, where Barry is sent out to kill someone for the detective who found out he was the one that murdered his partner, and Barry doesn't want to do it. The guy ends up being I think it's a jujitsu master.
Yeah.
He's trained his
World
daughter as
champ or
well,
something.
and it becomes quite a journey for Barry and then Fuchs. What did you think? What were your thoughts on that episode? I mean, that was a real standout for me.
Oh, for sure. That was really cool because it was just a great bottle episode. Just as
Yeah.
it looked awesome. It had a really great arc that was ultimately very self-contained,
Hmm.
uh, but also drove Fuchs' future decision making and kind of was the culmination of Barry's uh, projecting of the his underworld life.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, that like action is really cool, and they had to, the absurdist angle of having Lily be this like feral demon of sorts that can fucking fly around and fuck
Yeah.
Barry up. And
When she first
Fuchs,
like jumps at him and like
yeah,
she like flies, I was like, oh shit.
yeah.
Lily
I
started
was
laughing out loud.
Vulture has a piece where they actually talk to the actress who plays Lily, and she's like, "Yeah, they just put me on this harness, and they would like pull, and it would just kind of shoot me in the air, and they would just tell me to like go at it, and really cool." And like when
Yeah.
she climbs the tree and perches on the roof, then she's on the car at the end. Oh man,
She bites
uh,
his face. Oh man.
it does again. That episode was cool because like you get the character continued character movement for Fuchs and Barry, mainly Barry.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have the self-contained
Yeah.
action and small story in the episode itself. So that was my
And
favorite episode of the season.
oh, absolutely. Same for me. And I love how it ends with like Ronnie fighting Barry in the grocery store, and like just everything about that whole sequence was really great. Um, I don't know. It felt just like this season they really have a direction for the show and a story that they want to tell, and I think that, talking about Thrones, and we kind of knew they had the beats, but we talked about George R. R. Martin not finishing the stories, they kind of were filling in gaps that maybe they were hoping not to have to fill in. But Barry feels like it's set. Like they know what they want to say, at least going into each season. I don't know if it's like a full story arc that they have written out or not. I don't know, but I know that they've been picked up for a third season, obviously. Um, Barry is a show you can't miss. Definitely got to check it out. Any last thoughts on this season before we move on?
No, I think I have it top 2 on the year right now. I
What's
think
what's with it?
I still have Russian Doll at number
Yeah,
1,
Russian Doll's
but
great.
I have Barry 2, I think, right now. Head
I
of True
find
Detective and Veep and Thrones.
when I wake up in the morning, I find myself singing the Russian Doll song. Gotta get up, gotta get out. Like just think about it all the time. All right, I'm thinking he's back. Pretty good Keanu impression, right? Not bad. I've been working on it.
Yeah.
John Wick. Are you pissed off, John? Yeah. Okay. I like it. John Wick 3. Chad Stahelski back at the helm.
Nailed it.
80% on Rotten Tomatoes. As I said it early at the beginning of the show. Unseated Avengers Endgame at 53 million at the box office.
More than that.
Man.
It was like 57.
Oh, got 57. Arclight at 53. I mean, man, guns, lots of guns. Like this is a brutal, gory, action-packed film. And I loved it. John Wick has somehow become probably that and like the Fast and Furious films are the best action movies that are consistently made. With that and Mission Impossible as well, obviously.
Thank you.
I mean, those three are just undeniable franchises at this point. How did you feel about John Wick 3? Were you as pleased with it as I was?
I was pleased with it, but I'm actually
here's the but
qualifier coming.
Right.
Comparing it to the other John Wicks, it's actually my least favorite, which I think is uncommon take from the weekend.
So tell me why.
So I think John Wick 1 works really well just because it's really self-contained story, discernible plot, makes sense throughout, and of course has the textbook amazing choreography, badass fighting, gunplay, all that. And then 2 was like unexpected in how successfully it raised the stakes, continues to build on this world in John Wick, this assassin underbelly that's international, but we really see it through the lens of New York City. And they jet set around the world, this time in Italy, and more shadowy characters. So we don't really learn much about this high table, but the groundwork is laid. And again, probably most importantly, the fight choreography and then the overall action is leveled up. For chapter 3, for Parabellum, it was the first time watching any of these movies where I was just kind of like annoyed with the world because it just started to feel really obtuse to me. Specifically, the whole jaunt in the Sahara, meeting with the Elder, which ultimately just felt like this weird dead end of sorts. And right before that, we go see Bronn and Halle Berry, and we have this really cool fight with the dogs over at the fucking mint for the gold coins. But none of it really like felt that consequential. Like this is the first time the plot just started to lose me, which was weird. I didn't expect this because this plot is set up. You know, we're in media res here. Like John is on the run. Ian McShane gave him an hour head start, and then he's gonna get fucked up. And I really liked it. It was simple.
Excommunicado.
Exactly. And it got just a little more all over the place than I expected. And ultimately, I think it ends in a good place with the fight with Mark Dacascos. But
yeah,
I don't know. The story was just a little more muddled than I expected and wanted as a result.
Yeah, it was a lot of traveling, a lot of moving around, getting back and forth from one place to another. Um, I I thought the scenes were cool. I actually had a similar feeling. Like I'm not really sure why we had to go necessarily see Halle Berry. Like I felt like it didn't.
Casablanca.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it all totally made sense. But then I was like, why do I care this much about the plot of John Wick 3? Because what I go to John Wick to see is like really cool action sequences, enough intrigue about a world that's pretty cool to me, and I find very intriguing to learn more about. Um, and I also just feel like this is probably the one time I like see gore to this level, and I'm like okay with it,
Hmm.
because I think that especially with all the violence that there is just in society, it can feel a little bit like do we need like this level of like something being grotesque? And this I don't feel like it. I feel like it's so surreal that I can't ever like say like, oh, someone's gonna like
How'd
take
you
my
feel
name.
about the eyeball puncture in like minute 6 or whatever it was?
I cover my eyes for that. I didn't watch that. I'll put it that way. I'm a bit of a baby when it comes to that sort of stuff. Um, so there were a lot of really cool fight sequences. It starts off with a fight with Boban. How did you feel about that fight?
uh, Again, it was a cool fight. He's fighting with a fucking book,
Book
and
with a fucking
Boban is like
pencil.
7'3" or whatever. I think he might be bigger than that. He's the heaviest guy in the NBA, tallest guy in the NBA.
Mhm.
Um, and that was really cool because Boban, I thought actually acquitted himself pretty well for a non-actor,
Yeah.
and it didn't feel as gimmicky as the initial tease in the trailer made you assume. It's like, oh, Boban's in this, he'll
Hmm.
get killed by John Wick, and it's like, okay, fine. But
Yep.
it was actually a cool fight, and like, yes, Wick having shit stashed in a random folk fairy tale book in the New York Public Library is ridiculous. Doesn't seem any more ridiculous than other things we accept in this story,
Hmm.
so that's fine.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I thought that was cool, and really having that scene, and then the first fight scene where after his chase and he goes to that uh, antique weapon place,
Yeah.
and they spend like about 50 seconds him retooling this revolver of sorts and picking the parts out just to shoot one dude and then be done with it. Really cool. But then the brutality and the humor associated with him throwing all those knives and the hatchet and the shuriken and all that was fucking wild.
The
And that's what I
choreography.
was expecting the movie to keep going. And again, once the story got a little all over the place, it kind of took me out of it because I thought it
Mhm.
starts really fun.
Yeah. No, I agree. I thought the choreography in that antique shop or antique weaponry was
Yeah,
amazing.
museum,
Um,
whatever it was.
you know who I actually wasn't that impressed with in this was Asia Kate Dillon. Uh,
The Adjudicator.
yeah, the adjudicator. I get her role and it makes sense, but just something about her just felt like it didn't totally work. And I don't know if it was her performance. I don't know if it was the fact that the adjudicator is, it's part of that mystery that we don't quite totally understand how the high table and
Yeah,
the person above that works. There's a lot of like unknowns to that. And I think that that kind of made me feel like, okay, so why were they so afraid of this person, or why this person matters so much? There were a lot of cameos in this. Jason Mantzoukas just
TikTok
uh,
man.
yeah, but didn't really have that much to do other than kind of walk behind Fishburne, and then pick John
Right.
Wick up at the end. Fishburne was his normal hammy self in this, which I thought was pretty
Yep.
awesome.
The Bowery King.
Yes. Um, the underground is where stuff happens. Ian McShane also was his normal
Yep.
awesome self in this. I love just hearing him talk.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, McShane's like post Deadwood career as just like older character actor has been really cool.
Hmm.
And not that to say that he's only in good stuff, like he's in American Gods, for example, but Winston is just a really fun aspect of the John Wick story. And I
Hmm.
was really happy that they kept him going in the story because there's few times you think he might, go away. But the whole like lore of the Continental Hotel and the fact that it's actually an international assassin hotel is just really really cool. And Winston, actually, I feel like this is the best movie for Winston because he has probably has the most lines, but he also has the most to do. But like in the beginning of Act Three, when they have that fight at the Continental, when the guys with the body armor show up, he's just like chilling in the safe room, like
Yeah.
drinking and like smile waving as they leave and come back, and really
Mm-hmm.
funny. And then him setting off the next movie by um, yapping Wick off the roof.
Yep.
Are they setting Winston up to be a true villain and thus get a lot more screen time for John Wick 4? Or is that more of like a he did what he had to do, John will understand type thing? It's kind of where I lean. But I mean, what do you think? Because I mean, obviously we like Ian McShane, but where do you think they're taking Winston as a character?
I think if Winston really wanted Wick dead, he would have shot him in the head because he knows that that suit is bulletproof.
Right.
Um, I think he was either doing this knowing that Wick would probably have to die, and this is a way that he could at least give him some time to get away. Um, or maybe he is a real heel turn, which would be awesome because Ian McShane, I think, would be a great villain
Mm-hmm.
in these films. Overall, I think they set up Wick 4 really well, especially putting Fishburne and Reeves back together. For 4, I think will be awesome. Uh, just a couple of other people I wanted to shout out here. Lance Reddick,
Yes,
who
the
plays
concierge.
who, yeah, the concierge. I think his name is Sharon.
Yep.
Him and Wick in that battle in the Continental was just incredible. When they come back, they're like,
Yep.
need more
The shotguns.
firepower, and he's just McShane's just like, there you go, and like he's like going through like which ones to grab. Just so awesome. And you already mentioned Dacascos,
Yes.
who I thought him and the two twins were awesome. And they added this real sense of like kung fu to the movie in terms of like the way that they fought, which I thought was really awesome. And the fight with the twins was great because they didn't kill Wick, even though they could have at different times. They really just wanted to have like a good battle with him.
Right. I actually think they kind of manifest a lot of this, but the whole like presence of Wick as like this celebrity in this underground world,
Mm-hmm.
and how like those guys are like, Wick, it's a pleasure to try
Yeah.
and fuck you up right now. As they let him get back on his feet before they attack him, like that was really cool. And I just kind of wish we got a little bit more of that. Like we spent a lot of time just in like the weird
Yeah.
nuances of this intergalactic underbelly. Yet, if we focus a little bit more on just Wick's like moment to moment as this underworld celeb, I don't know, it would have been cool. But I mean, that guy, I mean, Yayan Ruhian
Yeah.
from The Raid. I mean, he briefly has a scene in The Force Awakens as well, but people really compare the action, the choreography to
The Raid.
from John Wick to The Raid, and I think a lot of people are really clamoring for the guy who plays Rama in The Raid to be in John Wick 4 in the future. Because Mark Dacascos is another guy who is not really as famous as you think he should be because he's this really charismatic international actor.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a great turn in this movie. It's kind of a shame he dies. But yeah, I mean, John Wick 4, we obviously know what's happening. This is the biggest opening weekend of any John Wick movie. In fact, its opening weekend outgrossed the entire first movie's domestic run. And this movie actually, despite all the jet setting, only cost like 50 something $1 million. And it's
Already made
about
a profit.
already tripled that within we got worldwide grossing. So it'll make a big profit in the coming weeks. Uh, and as you said, be it Fast and Furious and Mission Impossible, to top scale action franchises. And then I think John Wick is there because the franchise has never been more popular. And it's truly Keanu's second act or third act, I guess. So
Yeah.
even if this wasn't my favorite of the movies, it's still really awesome that we have action movies like this continuing to get made. And honestly, shout out Lionsgate. They're the smallest and least successful of the major studios, and John Wick was them. They everyone else passed, so it's a good win for them. They needed it.
To wrap up Wick talk, just give me your top 3 action sequences in this film.
Number one is the knife fight in the beginning. in the museum thing. Number 2 is the fights in the mirror glass room at the end with the Cascus, where
Yeah.
they like brutally like they throw each other into glass case after glass case, and they don't cut away. You're watching the dude fucking slam through the glass, and the stunt double fucking ate that shit. Like it's so hard.
Crazy.
And then third, I think, is the motorcycle scene. Kind of gave me some
Okay.
like Dark Knight vibes, and I guess
Yeah.
it didn't look as good as some of the other stuff because the camera's kind of up close and stuff. But just watching John, and even before that on the horse, just like his ability to freestyle and like audible on the fly while he's surviving and fucking murdering people. It's just entertaining stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Number one for me is the antique gun knife shop. What that you said was your number one.
Yep.
I love when like they don't have anything to like kill each other with, so they each like take a second, like look around inside the cases next to them and then break the glass. Like that was
Great
such a
humor.
great moment. Number two is the escape from High Garden, or when they when Brown shoots Halle Berry's dog and
Yep.
they go all out. I gotta be honest, like when seeing those dogs like mess people up, or like when Halle Berry's like and like the dog runs and jumps off her back and gets the guy that's like 2 stories up, I was like, holy
Mhm.
crap, like this is incredible.
It's like the dogs in Call of Duty World at
Yeah.
War that you had no hope of surviving whenever someone called them in.
No hope. And then also at the end of that, when she's like, he shot my dog, and John Wick's like, I get it. Like it just like one of those great moments that calls back to obviously one of the earlier one, the first Wick. And then the twin fight we talked about. I just thought that was just a really awesome, really well choreographed scene. And again, the humor in it. Like there's a point where like Wick gets knocked down, they don't kill him for the second time, and he like puts a
Mhm.
hand up, like, all right, give me a second. Like they're like, he slowed down. He's like, well, we'll see. Just really, really good.
Yeah, man. It's wild shit. And ultimately I think what's cool about Wick is that it's unabashedly rated R. It's unabashedly adult
Yeah.
action drama. Really just action. But that's not common anymore because usually doesn't make any money. So as I said, like Lionsgate got the hit here and it's not going away, that's for sure.
So we're gonna wrap up there for this week. What should people be checking out to stay up with us next week, Dave?
Yeah, so next week we'll be talking about Aladdin from Disney, the live action remake. We briefly touched on the trailer a few months ago. We'll also touch on Fleabag season 2, the second and final season from Phoebe Waller-Bridge. We never talked about season 1, so I'm looking forward to that. Also about Catch 22, the George Clooney Hulu 6-part show, adaptation of the famous book. What We Do in the Shadows. We haven't talked about this season 1 at all. It has been renewed. So looking forward to talking about that based off the Taika Waititi film. And I think we'll talk about a lot of music coming up, but we'll have to save some of that for later. But I think we'll talk about that Beast Coast album. Joey, Badass, Flatbush Zombies, Underachievers. A lot of people we talk about whenever they drop music. Now that they're all dropping music as one entity, it's pretty exciting. So plenty to talk about next week.
Somebody please get this man a gun. All right. See you next week.